Be looking at the Blackmagic Pocket 4K, or should you be looking elsewhere? Hello, my name is Jonathan Palfrey and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Please like and subscribe as always, as it massively helps me out. Now today I wanted to talk about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K camera. Is it a camera that you should still be looking at purchasing in 2022, or has it been surpassed so much by other cameras it's just something you shouldn't be looking at? This camera, when it came out and we picked it up a couple of years ago, was absolutely incredible. Like the specs, the image quality, the fact it could shoot RAW in this kind of tiny package, it ticks so many boxes. Yes, it was missing certain features. It didn't have any autofocus in there. It doesn't have any stabilized sensor, but at the end of the day, this is a cinema camera, so we could accept missing those features. And then when you see the price, you kind of think, well, fair enough. You're saving so much money that lacking those extra features isn't really a big deal. Now, the quality of the image is incredibly good, and I think it still is incredibly good even to this day. The dynamic range isn't quite as good as some of the competition that you're seeing out there. It's certainly noticeable after a few years. When I go back to looking at some of the footage where I've been re-editing some films and including footage from shoots from a couple of years ago, mixed in with, say, the 6K Pro now, you definitely notice the dynamic range difference. But in terms of the colours and the quality of the image, it really does still stand up. For me, the number one selling feature of this camera is its price. The quality for the price is just unbeatable. You know, for £1,000 here in the UK, you're not just getting the camera, you also get DaVinci Resolve included as well, which is worth £300 in itself. I mean, in some ways, it's almost worth picking up the camera for the editing software and you effectively get a cheap camera with it. You know, even if it's just there as perhaps a B camera or a backup camera to everything else that you own. The price of this camera for its quality and the function it provides is incredible. However, there are drawbacks. You know, it isn't perfect and there are reasons why you may consider that it's not good value for money if you were going to pick one up today. Of course, the most obvious thing is battery life. Battery life is something that has really plagued this camera, and it's my one biggest frustration when using the Pocket 4K. You can live with other things. You can live with lack of other features, things like lacking autofocus. But battery life, with the small Canon batteries it was using, it's painful. Like, best case scenario, using an official Canon battery, you're looking at 40 minutes. You start using some like Amazon batteries and they can be dead in 20 and it will just suddenly die out of nowhere. It was so frustrating how random the battery life could be with this camera, which means that really you have to use it with external power. That is, for me, the only good option when shooting with the Pocket 4K. Of course, that means you need to then figure out a way of rigging it as well. And you need to then look at things like cages, rails, and adapters and battery plates, all this kind of stuff, V-lock batteries. So suddenly that cheap price isn't so cheap anymore. It does start adding up. Now, of course, all these features and functions other than the cage, the things that you can use in future cameras that you purchase, so they're not a complete kind of waste of money. It's not like a single purchase and you can't use it ever again. It will still be useful when you upgrade to a bigger rig in the future. But it is frustrating that you just can't use this camera pretty much bare. Speaking of accessories that you really need to also buy for this camera, in addition to sort of rigging it out for the battery life, you also need to rig it out so that you can use it with an external monitor. External monitors are great. They give you much better quality, usually bigger screens than what you get built in on cameras. The Blackmagic 4K has an incredibly good screen on the back. There's nothing wrong with this screen. It could be a bit brighter, but certainly compared to what a lot of competition has, it's excellent. Only really the 6K Pro actually beats it in terms of brightness and image quality. But unfortunately, it is fixed on the back, which means it only works at one angle. And for the camera that's this shape and size and the fact that you've got to rig it, it means it's in the wrong place. Unfortunately, it's just not that useful for pretty much any use case, unless you can say maybe rig it on a tripod where you can put the battery out of the way or you can be running off mains, and then maybe you can be okay. But certainly if that tripod is down low, once again, the screen is kind of useless. It has to be pretty much at head height or just below head height to be a useful screen for actual production. So you find you end up just using it for menus and nothing else really. And unfortunately, because of its positioning as well, it means you can't put the battery plate right up against the screen. So you do have to have this kind of slightly separation and a gap there, which once again, I don't think really helps with the ergonomics of the camera. For us, for the external monitor, we went with the Atomos Shinobi, and it's been good. It's been an excellent monitor to work with this camera. Obviously, I can power the camera and the Shinobi off V-Lock power, and it's done its job. It's nice and bright, you can see outside, it's nice and sharp, and it fixes that problem. But it does mean that you have to rig the camera up every single time. You can't really just quickly grab this camera out of the bag and start shooting. It is something that you either have to have a large bag to have it rigged all the time, or you're going to have to spend time building it each time you want to start shooting. This camera, of course, also has a micro four thirds sensor. And if you saw my GH6 reaction video, you can see my opinion on this, and it seems to be controversial because a lot of people didn't agree with me. But for me, micro four thirds is certainly on its way out. Is it dead? Perhaps, perhaps not. But it's certainly not, the peak choice in terms of a sensor in 2022. I think we really are heading very fast towards full frame. It's amazing how much it's advanced since this camera came out just a couple of years ago, and even just 5 years ago when the GH5 came out. Back then, the micro four thirds sensor allow you to kind of push the image quality a lot more than what you could get with full frame. Now, that isn't so much the case. So is the micro four thirds sensor on this camera still good enough? Well, it certainly is. It's just the case of the lens options. If you were purchasing one of these today and you didn't have any other lenses, it's maybe a little bit tougher to know what lenses you should go for. Yes, you could get down the micro four thirds route, but there are obviously advantages and disadvantages to that. Do you want to be investing in micro four thirds lenses in 2022? There are some excellent lenses out there, but some of the good ones actually get quite pricey. The alternative, of course, is to go with a speed booster on the front, but that's going to add additional cost to your rigging of the Pocket 4K. We've been using the Metabones. We've got it since the camera came out, the actual proper Blackmagic 4K Ultra speed booster. It is excellent. It does a brilliant job, but it is very expensive. I mean, it's effectively half the price of the camera. And if you're buying the camera today, unless you can pick up one of those secondhand, I think it would be really quite hard to justify spending that kind of money. Now, there is the Viltrox speed booster, which is just sort of a generic micro four thirds one. It's not specifically designed for this camera, and that does a decent enough job. It's much cheaper. It is a little bit soft when you're shooting quite wide open on a lens. It is something you have to be a little bit aware of. Depending on what kind of budget you have, that's kind of my warning there, is like, if you go down the route of buying speed boosters and buying all the rigging, suddenly that price is going to go up, and perhaps maybe the Pocket 4K isn't the best option anymore. Is 4K still enough? That's the other question that probably people are asking a lot now. We see so many cameras out there that can shoot more than 4K, like the Pocket 6K and 6K Pro. I have to tell you right now, it is. This camera produces an extremely sharp 4K image, better than a lot of cameras like the C70 that we own and use all the time. So if you want a really nice organic looking but still sharp image, this is still probably one of the best cameras out there. I keep being amazed about how good the quality is even to this day. What it means is it's a much more manageable file size shooting Blackmagic 4K RAW than 6K RAW, which I think works a lot better if you're doing a lot of corporate work and doing interviews and things. 6K in those kind of situations becomes really quite unwieldy, and I'm not a big fan of shooting in that resolution for a lot of corporate work. And you've still got ProRes in the camera as well, so actually the HD down converted ProRes in the camera is very sharp, probably better than what a lot of the actual competition output when it comes to HD. So that's my pros and cons with this camera, and I think really now in 2022 it does come down to the sort of total price that this camera is going to cost you. It's a great camera still, there's certainly nothing wrong with it, and if you own one, keep it. I think you're going to get many more years of really good usage out of it. One additional thing I didn't actually mention earlier is, of course, you can use this with the A10 Mini mixers. which is incredible. Use it with the ISO mixer. It allows you to do multicam, so you can buy multiples of these and you can easily cut between them. It triggers the recording on them. It's such an awesome feature. It's something that in many people's productions could become a really awesome feature to speed up your workflow. Say you're doing a big multicam shoot, you're going to save a ton of time using Blackmagic 4Ks and A10 minis. However, to use this camera as your full production camera day to day, like I say, it does require a lot of rigging and accessories, which does add up. And that is going to be the biggest problem when you're looking at the Pocket 4K. Realistically, if you buy the camera with the Metabone speed booster, with V-Lock batteries and with cages and all this kind of other accessories, the price is going to push up quite a bit. It's going to start creeping very close to a lot of the very good competition, including its bigger brother, the Pocket 6K Pro, which overall is a much better camera. Outside of Blackmagic, there's plenty of other competition too. Look at Panasonic with the GH6. Yes, in my reaction video, I wasn't super enthusiastic about Micro Four Thirds, but you know what? That camera doesn't require any rigging, has excellent stabilization and decent enough autofocus and image quality that arguably now is just as good, maybe better than what the Pocket 4K can do. And overall, it's going to probably cost you about the same as it would be to pick up the Pocket 4K fully rigged, ready to shoot. If you wanted to go down the full frame route, there's the cameras like the Panasonic S5, which arguably could be even a better option than the GH6. And if you spend a bit more, there's cameras also like the A7 IV, which I think is just an awesome camera for pretty much any use case. And of course cameras like the Canon R6 as well. So although the Blackmagic Pocket 4K looks like it could be really good bang for buck, maybe once you add everything up, perhaps it's not. Perhaps you should be looking at other cameras instead. I'd love to know what you think. Please leave your thoughts in the comment section down below. Is this a camera that you think is still worth picking up? I think certainly if you can pick up a cheap rigged one off eBay or something, easy, go for it, why not? But if you're buying from scratch and you want to buy all the bits to make it really functionable, maybe not. Maybe there are better options out there. I hope you've enjoyed this video and have found it useful. If you have, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.